Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I wanted to do something a little bit different. I feel like on BookTube and in the book blogging community, and book Twitter, and book Instagram, all of these places, I feel like we can get into a little bit of an echo chamber. We just talk about the same books over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. So I wanted to highlight some of the books that I love that I just never really talk about on my channel or on my blog. So these are books that have either never been mentioned at all, or books that I've maybe mentioned once or twice. When I was making this list, it turned out that there were a lot that I wanted to talk about, so I might end up making this a little bit of a series, so if you like this video, then definitely let me know. So the first book on this list is one that I wasn't really expecting to have put on this list before I read it, but I just loved it, and it's such a fantastic book, even though it was a little bit challenging for someone who is not Scottish. Irving Welsh's Trainspotting is an incredible book. I read this in 2016, which was just before I started sort of talking about books on the internet, and it's such an incredibly good book. It's also one of the best book-to-film adaptations, so if you have seen the movie and you loved it, you should absolutely pick up this book. So one of the reasons that this book is kind of difficult, and I think might put some people off, is the language. God, I can't remember what the term is, but it's written as it would be spoken. As you read it, you're reading it in that really, really thick Scottish accent. So my favorite story about this book is that I had it with me on a train. We were actually about to go up to Aberdeen, and I decided to bring it with me. So I opened it up and was like, oh my God, this is tough. And I had been living in Edinburgh at that point for a while, so I could get through it, and it is something that you get used to, but I snapped a photo of the first page of the book and sent it to a couple of my friends who are big film buffs and both like this movie, and one of them responded to me, "Why didn't you get that in English?" It's a tough read, but it is so worth it. Trainspotting is about a group of friends who live in Edinburgh, and they are all, or almost all, heroin addicts, which sounds like a really, really depressing book, but it is so funny, and it is so fascinating and such an interesting and compelling read. This is not something that I would have thought that I would enjoy, but I saw the movie and I really loved it, and living in Edinburgh at the time, I decided to pick it up, and it was one of the best books that I read in 2016. I highly recommend it. So next up is a book that I could gush about all day and all night, every day. It is one of the single best books that I've ever read, and if I didn't get into science fiction, I would have never discovered it. And that is Hyperion by Dan Simmons. So this is actually the omnibus with the first two Hyperion books. So Hyperion and the Fall of Hyperion. It's actually sort of a set of four because it has two books that follow, but they're set 300 years or so after the events of the first two books. So oh my God. I cannot tell you how amazing this book is. So Hyperion, the first one, is essentially the Canterbury Tales in space. It's amazing. Genuinely one of the single best books that I've ever read in my entire life, and I would so highly recommend it. It is not beginner sci-fi. I would say maybe get into sci-fi and adult sci-fi a little bit more before you begin, but it is so incredibly rewarding. I love this book. I've only read the first two in the kind of Hyperion Cantos, or whatever it's called. I haven't read Endymion and the Rise of Endymion, but I plan to, and I plan to actually revisit this series before I do that, because they are just, I don't know if I've gotten this across yet, but they are so good. Next up is a book that I know a lot of people here will have heard of, but I don't really hear it talked about much anymore. This was one of the first young adult books that I ever read, and even though it didn't sort of slingshot me into the genre the way Rebel of the Sands did, I still think it's genuinely one of the best books that I've read in a really long time. That is The Lie Tree by Frances Hardinge. So this edition is the illustrated edition with Chris Riddell. Chris Riddell? I think it's Riddell. Chris Riddell. And I now own two copies of this book because I have this one and I have the non-illustrated edition, which was the one that I had originally read. The reason that I was originally interested in The Lie Tree is because it was sort of the dark horse winner for the Costa Coffee Book Award of 2016, and it beat out authors like Kate Atkinson, who people were really thinking would win this award, and instead the Lie Tree won. So I was really curious to read what this young adult book that beat out all of these amazing adult authors was, and it is so good. In short, The Lie Tree is about a girl who is the daughter of a naturalist, and he gets caught up in a scandal, and they have to move away to this tiny island, I believe off the coast of England. And it's magical realism, but it's historical fiction, and the way that she blends the two is so incredible. The main character is something that we don't often get in young adult, and that is an angry girl. She is an angry person. She's not a particularly nice person, but this book is so compelling that you can't help but continue on her story and just watch where things go. Oh, this next book made me cry so hard. And it's a difficult book to get into, I think, especially if you're not used to literary fiction. However, for me, it was so well worth it. I'm like tearing up thinking about it. So The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro is such a wonderful book. And I know that it's a movie as well. I haven't actually seen the movie, but the movie is supposed to be wonderful as well. The premise of this book is very simple. It is essentially about an English butler taking a drive in the countryside to visit an old colleague, and he's just kind of thinking back on his career at this particular house in the English countryside. It sounds really simple, it probably sounds really boring, but this book has one of the single best endings that I have ever read. Again, I'm tearing up thinking about it. It's just so wonderful, and the way that sort of the story is revealed, it's just so good. I would just, if you're interested and if you want to read something that's much more of a slow burn, then I would so highly recommend reading this book. It's so wonderful. I'm squeaking right now. If you think that this might not be your thing, a very close runner-up for this that doesn't quite make the list is Never Let Me Go by the same author, and it is his take on science fiction, and it is a wonderful book, really wonderful. So if you think this might not be for you, then that one could be. Last up on this list of books that I love that you may not know about is one of my favorite authors. I love him so much. He's probably my favorite fantasy author, adult fantasy author, grimdark author, giving you some hints here. This book, well, I love his trilogy so much, and that is tied on this list, and the reason that it's not on this list is because I don't own those books anymore. I think I have them on Kindle. So I have a physical book to show you here, but like, I cannot tell you how good his books are. So I picked Best Served Cold by Joe Abercrombie. So this is a standalone novel in the First Law world. So First Law trilogy is a series of 3 books that are all connected. All the events happen one right after the other. And that is its own story. And then he wrote 3 separate standalone books that you can read sort of as companions, but they're their own stories. I think Best Served Cold has probably one of the single best female characters in fantasy, which is a very tall order. Okay, so you see all of these books that are about like female assassins, and they don't do any killing. They don't kill anyone. They just think about killing and then feel bad about killing, and they're forced into killing and da-da-da. No, she's a murderer. She's a straight up murderer. She's a mercenary. She leads a mercenary group, and she ends up being betrayed by her employer, she and her brother. So her brother is murdered, and they attempt to kill her. They think they've killed her, but ooh, they have not. And she comes back for her revenge, and it is so good. I love this book. I haven't read the other 2 in the First Law standalones. So that would be The Heroes and Red Country. Because I've loved his 4 other books, I imagine I'm gonna love those so much, but this is probably my favorite, other than the 3rd book in the First Law trilogy, which is also amazing. If you like grimdark and you haven't read Joe Abercrombie yet, then seriously, get on it. So that is it from my list of books that I love that you may not know about. These are all 5-star reads. I would give them more if I could, but I love these books so much, and if you haven't read them or if you haven't heard of some of them, I would so highly recommend picking them up. So if there are any books that you feel don't get enough love here in the book community, then definitely leave me a comment. If you've read any of these books, if you like them, dislike them, definitely let me know. And if you like this video, I'm thinking about doing more like this because I feel like there's so many books that just don't get enough love here. So if you like this video, then definitely subscribe, and I will see you next time.